Just to kick things off with introductions, my name is Robert Horan. I'm a solutions engineer here at Valiantys, been here a couple of years now. My main focus is on cloud migrations, cloud migrations, merges, anything cloud really. Um, so wherever I might be able to help teams with understanding, which plan might be a good fit for them or how best to get to the cloud, that's what I do. I'm going to pass the mic over to Ariel.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining. I'm Ariel da Silva. I'm a delivery manager here at Valiantys. I've been working mainly with cloud migrations for the past 3 years and a half, and most likely focusing on the technical side, doing the scripting part, the heavy lifting of the data and the app data. And joining me right now is David Mitchell, also a delivery manager. David?
Hi, thanks, Ariel. Yeah, I'm David Mitchell. I'm a delivery manager at Valiantys. Been with the company for a little over 4 years, and I work primarily with migrations and assessments for migrations, large and small.
And Cody?
Thank you, Robert. Hello, everyone. My name is Cody Berenson. I'm a principal consultant here at Valiantys, and I also work primarily in the cloud migration space. Handling migrations of pretty much all shapes and sizes and the different levels of transformation that come with that from both beginning to end and what that looks like. So thank you all for having us.
All right. So just to kick this off, as we're waiting for folks to ask questions, I think what would be really helpful is to maybe take some of the questions that we get very frequently as we go into migrations. Um, I tend to hear a lot of the same questions over and over again because um, everybody's starting off with the same point, at the same point. They think, okay, we've got to go to the cloud, but what's the best way? And so one of the first questions that we get all the time is, should we lift and shift? Should we transform? What's the best way to get over the cloud? And so I'm going to open this up to the floor. Cody, did you maybe have any thoughts, or I can take this if you'd like.
Sorry, I was just opening. Are you the one in chat, David or Robert? I mean.
Yeah, just so one of the questions that we get most often is what's the best strategy? Should we lift and shift? Should we transform? Should we go greenfield maybe? There are different ways that people can migrate to the cloud.
Mhm.
There are pros and cons for all of them.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Um, yeah, I think it really depends from a client perspective on what your needs are, as well as an understanding of what the instance data is really going to look like. So in some cases, we find that, I think often lift and shift is going to be one of the most widely adopted approaches. Not to say that, we can't optimize it, clean it up beforehand and move it over, or, potentially explore a green field. We've got one of those going in flight right now at Valiantis. Um, Really the thought is going to come down to a couple different things, which is how much downtime can you allow and how much time do you have maybe to do those pre-migration efforts that are going to go into it. And so when we're looking at for instance, when I work with clients, one thing that we want to understand is what's the data size. So how much are we looking to migrate, whether that's Jira or Confluence, and start to get some loose understanding of what those timelines look like. And so whereas we may want to do a big bang approach and just send everything all in one shot, but if we don't have the downtime available to be able to do that, that's where it can get really tricky. So what we do is we run a variety of test migrations and try to get an understanding of how much time can we expect, and if it will take for example's sake, say it takes 3 days to migrate, and as a client you can only allot for 2 days over a weekend or what have you, then that's where we have to determine what the most appropriate strategy is going to be. Or maybe we're not migrating some of that data. That's where it kind of opens up a handful of questions. But generally speaking, I would look at it as almost being, just a kind of a dance between us as the partner and you as the client to determine what are the most important parts of us migrating. What are our timeframes we're looking at? What are the other critical components of it? Maybe around user communications, or do we have some apps that are going to be particularly troublesome And then how does that fit in our time frame? And that may determine the answer. I've worked with clients who are able to allow for downtime. One was up to a full week, which was great. That allowed us to complete our migration in the time that we had given. Others we've had to split up because it may be a full week migration time, but as a client, they couldn't allow that amount of time to be taken, in 1 week's time. So we had to split it up over a variety of weekends, and then work to fine tune it to get it to fit into the time frame that we had allowed. So hopefully that's not a unclear answer, but I do want to say it's just kind of one of those things that it's where we have to work with you as the client and understand what your needs are, and then try to help fit the best model. Sometimes it works out really easily. Say we want to do a big bang and we can do all of that in one shot, and the timelines line up, or the timeline, the available downtime is available, and we can do that. Other times, if we're doing a greenfield, that can be just kind of a different process because you need to understand what we're trying to transform. That can sometimes be a little, could be a short period of time, could be a long period of time, depending on how your current system is structured. So a lot of different, variables to that, but there's a little bit of my feedback, and I'd be happy to hear David's feedback on it too.
It really is a conversation with each customer. It's tailoring to the customer's needs, and a lot of times the customers will surprise us. We'll assume that a very large institutional customer is going to have to go lift and shift, and they're going to want everything as much exactly the same, and they'll surprise us and say, no, actually, we want to transform, we want to go greenfield, and that's a part of our culture. So it's really a conversation between us and you, and helping you make that decision.
The one thing I'd like to tack onto that is one of the pieces that surprised me is a lot of times the idea of a greenfield migration sounds like, oh, it'll be really simple. We'll just spin up a cloud site and we'll start using it. And the truth is, there's a lot more work that goes into it than people might realize. Even if you're not bringing your data over, bringing your processes over might mean bringing workflows, bringing apps, bringing certain configurations, and then maybe even transforming how those are going to work in the cloud. So there's still going to have to be some sort of replication there, most likely. And those are areas that I think need to be considered somewhat heavily before, just as with any other migration strategy. Um, this isn't an easy decision to make. And so, when looking at Greenfield, you have to think about, well, what does Greenfield really mean? Are we really going to start from scratch, or are we going to bring over our processes and configurations with us? So, just my 2 cents there.
We got a few chat questions from our participants. So
Yeah, looks like a number of Confluence questions.
yeah, going for the first one. So what is the percentage of successfully migrated pages in Confluence using the default migration method versus the tooling that you have developed? Anybody want to take this?
I can kick off with my initial thoughts. I will say with this, so I recently migrated for a client that was incredibly large, and I can't remember the page count now, but we ended up migrating close to 3,000 spaces, so the page count was high. What I'd say is we got 100% success using the default CCMA tooling. That's what we would honestly recommend, is using, and if we're looking at Jira, I'd say JCMA all the same. So we'll just call it the Cloud Migration Assistant. But generally speaking, 100% success rate. I've honestly never run into a circumstance, whether it was a large migration or a small migration, of pages being lost. Sometimes what we do run into, just as a kind of an example of this, is we'll do some user testing that'll happen. And that's normally, it can be anywhere from a couple weeks to maybe a month out from when we migrate. And I've run into situations where users think a page isn't there, but they're looking at a test instance that was used, or they're not taking into account things that had changed from when the UAT, migration was done to when the actual cloud migration was done. So it's a little bit more of a, there may still be some investigation, but I've never actually found a missing page. As far as the answer around tooling we've developed, I may defer to some others on the call, but myself, every time that we've migrated, we always start with using the CCMA or JCMA as the default tooling. And I know there's some other custom solutions out there. I don't have, particular experience with them, but I'd feel very comfortable using the migration assistance in order to migrate your data. But love to open up to the rest of the group as far as either, and more feedback on which tool to use or any knowledge on any custom tools used to migrate.
Yeah, we've faced sometimes issues with some apps that by the time didn't really use the CMA yet or haven't using CMA still. So there's a lot of custom things that need to be done on that area. Some are possible, some are less effective because of APIs on the vendor side, that kind of stuff. But we've also developed for one project I worked on last year, 2024. We had issues with CMA and the personal pages of some users that were deleted. So this is something that I know CMA handles very well right now. So the kudos to Atlassian, because every day the migration tools are better. So there was a lot of things that we had to do back then that we don't have to do anymore. But when people ask for custom solutions and that kind of stuff, it always on my mind on an Atlassian migration goes to app information, because the Atlassian information itself, their tools are pretty good right now.
Yeah, sure. Just echoing, as far as tooling to migrate, the best tools to use are the Atlassian provided tools. We don't in any way say we're going to develop our own migration tools because we can do better than Atlassian. Their tools have been around for years and just have literally years of incremental improvements. And in terms of percent of successfully migrated pages, they all get migrated. It's migrating Confluence isn't a matter of, well, some pages came across and some didn't, and the tool brings them all across. It's 100%.
Next question regarding SSO. So what challenges exist for organizations that are dropping SSO when they move to cloud? How are users migrated in user management?
I'm curious what dropping SSO means when moving to cloud, actually. I can see getting rid of, maybe getting rid of is not the right way, but having to replace an SSO tool with Atlassian Guard. But I'm not sure what dropping SSO would mean in this case. I don't know, Cody or David or Ariel.
It sounds like they're saying they're not going to use single sign-on for the cloud.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And in terms of challenges for migration, it's not challenging in terms of the actual migration process. I think the challenge is going to be, it's just an adjustment for the users. The users are not going to, they're going to have to maintain their own password in the cloud. But how are users migrated in user management? Yeah, they would, the migration tools migrate the users. And so if single sign-on isn't setting the password or verifying the password through an identity provider, then the first time that user logs on, goes to the cloud platform with their email address, they're going to have to set up their own password as a self-maintained password.
Yeah. It doesn't seem to make sense to drop SSO though, really. I mean, there's so much that they would lose out on. The centralized management, any of the password restrictions, all the features that would come with Guard would be lost essentially if they didn't go in with SSO. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, if the attendee that posted the question might want to post more and give us some background on the scenario, maybe it can be more practical for a smaller user base. Maybe they're not wanting to pay the subscription for Guard. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I usually get the reverse. I have people who are managing their users locally who say, you know what, we're ready to go SSO. We're ready to start doing automatic provisioning and group-based permissioning. This would be the first time I've ever heard of dropping SSO as part of the migration process.
I was thinking the same thing there. Yeah, and one other tidbit I would throw in as far as the user migration goes, this is again where just one of the other many reasons why we would recommend the migration assistant tooling, because it'll do all this for you. Plus, you get there's manipulation's not the right term, but you get more options as far as how you can handle the migrating of users. And so to give a little context to that, in order to migrate users from a DC environment to cloud, cloud operates off the unique identifier of having a set email for each particular user. So the tooling will call that out. It can help you identify which ones you need to assign an email to, or maybe which users are using duplicated emails. And so that way you can fix all of those things. So that way users can have a seamless login experience when they get to cloud. There's some more steps to it than that, but generally speaking, this is just some of the other features that you get through that tooling. But it's a great way to understand, what your users will look like. Another way that I would say is that when we do a migrations, it will automatically bring, either the users associated with the project or all users and groups over to your cloud environment. And so that is something to think about if you're migrating into a sandbox connected to your prod environment. You may want to look at doing user cleanup prior to doing that, because otherwise it'll just bring them all over. And so there's some nuance to how you migrate all of them. We as a partner can always help you through that. But one really neat example I'll give is I worked with a client that was merging two organizations. So they already had one cloud environment, and then they had another. So the prime one was going to be the one moving forward. They bought another company that was using an Atlassian Cloud environment. They were migrating everything over. The trick is that they had created users with emails from both organizations on both sides. So the prime account had their email address, and then the same users had an email address, on the subprime cloud environment. And what the tooling allowed us to do was actually migrate the data in a certain way without changing how the users were actually built on cloud. And so we had the ability to say, for the purpose of the migration only, give them this email address, and then it seamlessly merged everything on cloud in the final product, and then they had just a nice seamless login experience. So just some of the great background as to how the tooling works and how well it can handle your users. Much like the pages question, I don't think I've ever seen a user get lost in a migration. If so, it's because it's been called out and we were aware it was going to happen. So just a little extra context there.
No, thanks.
Yeah.
Should we move to the next question?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, so do you support migration from Confluence data center to other targets like Google Workspace, for example?
That's another one where I'm really curious, because that sounds like a data center to data center kind of migration as opposed to migrating to the Atlassian cloud. I mean, and I say that because the Atlassian cloud has been on AWS this whole time. Was I right? Am I right in that Atlassian had a press release that they're supporting Google Cloud Platform?
Yes.
But that's really not going to be that's not going to change the functionality of the cloud or anything else. And of course, once that's available, of course, we would support migration to any of the any target that Atlassian would support. But this sounds to me like supporting a migration of a data center to another data center on a Google private cloud. Is that what it sounds like to you guys?
I'm not sure because it says other targets. I don't know if
Okay.
it's what you're talking about, or if it's saying we want to migrate off of Confluence to a different tool.
Yeah.
That's generally, I mean, that's generally not what customers come to us for.
Mhm.
But we're we're a solutions consulting company. So we don't necessarily turn away certain types of projects. We're willing to talk to you about anything. If that was something that you were looking to do, we would certainly have a conversation with you about it.
Yeah. But we are essentially 100% Atlassian focused. So I mean, our goals are really to help you with the Atlassian tools, the ecosystem, the marketplace apps that are in there. But again, to just from the wording of that question, and please, if to the audience, if you wanted to clarify, please do so. When I get questions like that, it's been around data center to data center migration, saying, okay, we're hosting this in our data center, but we'd really love to be in a private cloud, either in AWS or Google or Azure. And would you be able to help? And the answer has always been yes, absolutely. As long as you give us the ability to access those environments and we can get in and help, absolutely 100% we would be able to help you with your migrations.
Well, and even going further with that, Robert, it's it's not even a question. It's not an off scenario. Actually,
Right.
you know, data center to data center migrations are migrations that we do all the time. I have one of the consultants that works for me, reports directly to me. It's that those kind of migrations are literally the only kind of migrations she does all the time.
Yep.
So it's just another one of the types of migrations that we do.
And we see some complications with those, right? Maybe connecting to Active Directory or making sure that API integrations, for example, still work or webhooks. Would that be right?
I'm not sure I mean, what you mean by complications, but I mean,
So,
it's nothing that we can't, that we don't, it's
yeah.
nothing unresolvable,
Oh,
you know?
absolutely. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, these are things to consider. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I was helping some teams with, Jira and Confluence behind their firewall, and they said, okay, we wanted to move to AWS, but we had a number of tools internally behind our firewall that we were connecting to Jira, just using REST API calls and things like that. And we have to open up a firewall, say if we're now moving these tools out from from our local data center to private cloud. And so those are conversations I'd had with some folks in the past, things that they hadn't considered. And of course, we resolved that. It all involved planning.
Hmm.
As of today, depending on the complexity of your instance, I'd say it's sometimes more complex let's say merge two DC instances than moving a complex DC instance to the cloud, because the Atlassian tooling for the cloud is so well done right now, and merges on data center, they either require a custom solution or an app or some kind of other approach. So if you're thinking on merging your data centers or moving that kind of stuff, please try the cloud first.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ariel. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
different tool. You don't use JCMA or CCMA to migrate data center to data center. We often use, like for Jira, configuration manager for Jira, and it's a lot more. It's a more technical process. Um, yeah.
So we have a couple more questions in the chat. The next one would be, how long does a migration take for a Confluence instance?
So that's different for literally different for every migration, and that's not a cop-out answer. One of the things that we do when we're doing a migration for a customer is we do test migrations to see how long it's going to take. And it's pretty much based on the volume of data. You know, see Confluence instances of all different sizes. So the volume of data probably primarily contributes to the length of time that the migration takes to run. Another factor is how many add-ons is the migration tool migrating for you, because it has to process through those. And we work through that with you. So yeah, it's a matter of testing, and we very specifically and deliberately do that because one of the things that we're trying to establish with a migration is we're trying to figure out what that migration window is going to look like, because you as the customer, you're going to decide what your migration window is going to be. It's very commonly it's a weekend, sometimes it isn't. Some customers will do it on a weeknight. Some customers will do a cutoff on Thursday at noon and give us the rest of the migration. But so we need to be looking at the migration window, the length of the migration window, the length of how long the the running migration is going to take, how it fits into that window. So we do those tests because we're trying to establish predictability. So we'll do 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 tests, however long it takes. It's because it's not necessarily exactly the same length of time every time, but it's generally the same length of time. So just for example, I'm working on a migration now. Jira and Confluence each take about an hour to run. One of our larger customers that we've migrated in the past, it was a major airline in the United States, and it was literally hours stretching into more than one day. And we monitored several long running migrations with them just to work out the time. And we're looking at what we could do to make the time shorter. So it's a testing. Again, simple answer. It gets back to how much data you're migrating.
I'll tell you, there's an analogy I go to very often when I'm talking about migrations with customers. And I say it's like moving to a different house. Well, with a question like this, you can think about it like, are you moving stuff from your studio apartment? Or are you moving stuff from your mansion to your new house? Do you just have a couple of bags? Are you taking the furniture? Are you taking pets? I mean, it really depends on what you're carrying over and how it needs to be set up when you get over there. Um, Truthfully, there really is no one size fits all for migrations, and it's not just about size. It's not just about number of users. There's a lot of complex factors here, and this is the kind of thing where we'd love to talk to you about it if you have a chance and you want to reach out. But yeah, it depends on what you're going to move.
Yep, and Atlassian now for enterprise customers, they offer a dedicated RDS on the AWS Cloud. So, for example, we had an issue with an enterprise customer last month that their migration was just taking too much time for a weekend, and then speaking with Atlassian, we moved them to a dedicated RDS, and we pretty much decreased by 50% the time of the migration. So if this kind of stuff happens, there are solutions that we can find together with the Atlassian guys.
So Ariel, for our viewing audience that doesn't know what dedicated RDS is, how would
They
we
move them,
explain that?
they move them to clusters on the AWS where they either share the cluster with less people or they don't share the cluster with anyone. So they're not splitting their data. Yeah.
So it can effectively enhance the performance and
Yes, yeah, exactly.
make the transfer process potentially be faster and shorter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just to add a few other thoughts into this, and David, forgive me if you may have said this and I just missed it, but attachments and attachment size can really play a key factor in your migration. And so that can speed or slow down your migration time. For example, that I was referencing a large client earlier. We migrated, thousands of spaces. They had terabytes of attachment data that we had to migrate. And so that was one of the biggest challenges that we had to work through. And I don't want to get into all the nuance of doing this, but generally speaking, you can preload your attachments onto your instance. There is some caveats to it, so it doesn't necessarily work in every scenario, but that can help improve your migration timing, because what may take you, say, 4 days to migrate, you could preload attachments and then it may only take you, I don't know, a day, day and a half, 2 days to migrate. And you can fit it in your window because that has the ability to look at the delta and see, are there attachments that were added after we did this preload and then now can come over to cloud. So I think you gave a great answer earlier, when it comes to space, which is, I don't want to give a non-answer, but there's so much nuance to how all of this works when we're looking at migrating, whether that's Confluence or Jira. A lot of the page or the comments right now are more Confluence based, so I'll kind of lean into that. But this is just where, as David mentioned, getting a couple of tests in so we know what to expect. Where can we trim? Where can we save? What can we do? What are our options? These are all things that we look at as your partner and present those options so that way you can make an informed decision as to what is best for your organization to do. But just one other thought, and apps, generally speaking, Confluence don't tend to hold a migration up too much. Jira can be vastly different depending on what the app is. all of us on the call, I think, can think of a few that would be a little bit more troublesome than others. And so there's just so many different pieces that go into any of these migrations, and that's why we aim to plan as much as we can, so that way you as the client knows what to expect, and we can ideally deliver on that in that set time zone. So we take a lot of care to do that.
Yeah, and furthering to your point, Cody, this is why we test, because we literally don't know. Like a migration I'm working on right now, Confluence itself, the Confluence data migrates in an hour, and they have an add-on called Requirement Yogi, and the Requirement Yogi portion, the last time we tested it, took an additional 4 hours just with that app. And that's not something we typically see, but we wouldn't know that that's how it was going to run unless we tested it. So that's why we test it. And sometimes we literally sit there and just watch the migration run to see how long each piece is going to take.
All right. We have a couple more questions, and I think the next one is going to sound a little familiar. Sounds a little bit like our Confluence question, but do all Jira workflows migrate to the cloud?
They sure do.
Yeah, so I can try to elaborate on that a little bit. I mean, so to Cody's answer, yes, 100%. It's not a matter of some workflows come across, some don't. The migration tools are so solid in that regard. I mean, workflows are the heartbeat of Jira. If the tools were not 100% pretty much perfect in that regard, then migrating to cloud would be this sort of questionable disaster. So Atlassian can't put out a tool that just sort of works sometimes. The transfer of workflows has to be 100% perfect every time. Elaborating on this a little bit though, workflows consist of transitions and validators and conditions and post functions and such, and there are native validators and conditions and post functions, and then there are other ones that are added to the system by third-party add-ons. Well, the native workflow extensions migrate perfectly. You've got the third-party ones like JMWE and JSU and Script Runner. Those vendors have pretty well covered their workflow extensions migrating as well, but it's not 100%. So part of our migration process and testing and development is, we do the migration testing, we develop a run book, and we inventory say you got JMWE. We will inventory which JMWE workflow extensions did not come across in the migration tool. And this is a very common scenario, almost every migration, where we'll run the tool and then we'll have a handful of manual fixes that we'll have to do after that. I was going to say post migration, but it's really a part of the migration process. We run the migration tool and then we go fix those. So the migration process is a combination of automated and manual. So it's mostly automated, mostly handled by the tool, but the end result is we get 100% of your workflows and workflow functionality to the cloud.
Yep. And one of the things that I've been trying a lot on that kind of stuff, like when a customer has a complex workflow on the server or something that either they have to move to an automation or that kind of stuff, because let's say the vendor doesn't support the cloud environment, so they need to change the process a bit to get the same result. In cloud now you have free Rovo, so we can use agents on the automations to do things on the workflow of your tickets. Like it's something that you need to test a lot, because the agents have to, the prompt needs to give always the same result. But I've been having good experiences with that kind of stuff. So depending on the complexity of your workflow and the apps that you use, etc., there is a transformation that needs to happen on your complex workflows. But definitely the cloud has more tools to find a solution for you. So there is a way we're going to be able to put your workflow together and have the same result on the cloud environment for sure.
Yeah, one other thing I'd elaborate on, David had mentioned apps, and I'm sure David can remember this. Him and I both worked on a migration for a client that had a heavy use of script runner in their workflows, specifically within, I think it was a lot of post functions. It could have been some conditioners and validators in there. But I want to say, following the migration, we had 200, I think it was 200 different individual post functions to fix because of just a difference in scripting. So, for example, where script runner on DC supports Groovy scripting, script runner on cloud does not support Groovy scripting. You have to use nunchucks or Jira expressions. And so we had to go through a process to convert all of these scripted elements to these workflow functions over. So, and to kind of my quick answer at the beginning is, I mean, yes, the tool will always migrate all the workflows. You never have to worry about that. The rebuilding of some of the post functions, how some of the apps handle them, that can vary from app to app. If you're not using them, great. It's that much easier of a process. If you are using them, that's another area where we specialize and we can provide that guidance around. And as Ariel mentioned, there's a lot more tools available to us now with the wide adoption of AI and the support tools in cloud to help facilitate that. So really a lot easier than it used to be.
Yep. So version question. So what do I have to be in a specific version of Atlassian tools to migrate?
You do. So this is presuming you're on a DC environment, and I'd have to go check the documentation, but I can post that in chat here in a moment. There's a set number, I think for Jira, maybe like 5 and above or something like
No,
that.
it's I think 7.6.
7.6.
It,
Okay.
it is still higher up there, yeah.
Yeah.
I know that it's pre-installed on 8 versions or something like that, but for 7 you have to install it yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you for jumping in there, Robert. I couldn't remember which one it was. Confluence, I know, has a similar, restriction. You have to upgrade to a certain version of it before you can use CCMA. But
I will say this though, that it's an easy sounding question, and the answer truly is more complicated than that. There is a minimum version for the CCMA and JCMA, but every app that can be supported, they also have minimum versions too. So, I've talked to a lot of customers who their Jira versions say 7.6, 7.8, and then they have apps that Tempo Timesheets is a great example. Support for the JCMA was added later, and they had to upgrade their version of Jira to support a version that was supported by Tempo, which then also meant upgrading the database behind it as well to support Jira. So it's always good to take a look at what you've got, and not just look at the core tool compatibility, but also look at your app compatibility as well. And one of the great things is that once you've got the JCMA or CCMA in, you can see which apps have automatic migration paths right away. You can go to the marketplace to see when things have been when support for those tools have been added, or you can talk to us and we can help you with that too.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, generally, if you're keeping your systems updated, relatively up to date, you're going to be okay. If you haven't been, and we see customers that haven't updated and they're on an older version, then we're going to have to look a little closer. Occasionally, we'll have a customer that's still on server instead of data center, and if they're still on server and they haven't kept it up to date, that can get even a little bit more sticky. We can migrate you, and we have done that. A recent one was like similar to what you were talking about, Robert. An add-on that they had wasn't it wasn't up to date. It wasn't a version that was up to date enough to be migrated by the tool, but yet they weren't able to update the app because they were on server instead of data center. So then we actually, and it was a little too sticky to convert their server to a data center just to do that. So we wound up doing a manual process for that one app that would have ordinarily had an automated process. But so yeah, if you're up to date, you're going to be all right.
Absolutely. All right. We've got about 15 minutes left and a couple of questions. Let's move on to the next one. And that is, are people typically seeing costs increase or decrease going to the cloud? And I don't mind taking this one actually. I think that this isn't as simple as it sounds. One of the things that people look at or just tend to look at is license costs. And so, if you look at cloud licenses, sure, maybe they seem a little bit higher. Two things there. One is, yes, license costs can be a little bit higher, but you're also getting much, much more functionality right out of the box with cloud than you are with data center or server. But the other piece that I'd like to mention is that there are a lot of hidden costs that people don't consider, and that's the maintenance, the overhead, the having to deal with upgrades, patches, having to maintain your servers, the OS behind it, and any other pieces of software.
Security
Secure.
compliances.
The
Yeah.
hosting and the infrastructure is a big one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a ton of hidden costs that people don't
Hmm.
consider, and none of that's there in cloud. Once you get to cloud,
Hmm.
Atlassian's managing all of that for you. So, sorry, David, what were you going to say also?
No, I was just saying the hosting and the infrastructure. It's a great question. Because and we talk about it in our migration workshop and on our migration webinars. At face value, the licensing for cloud does cost more, but you have a lot of other costs that literally go away when you migrate from off of data center to cloud. So when you look at the total cost of ownership, that's a concept that we throw around a lot. Total cost of ownership should actually be lower.
Yeah. And again, if you're just looking at license costs, that's just one piece. And the other thing is the functionality. It's easy to say there's more functionality in the cloud, but really one of the
Mhm.
things that we can help you with is looking at apps, and seeing where you might be able to reduce apps. So when I say there's more functionality, I mean that there are things in data center that you just could not do out of the box that you needed to buy an app for that now you can do natively. Um, an easy one is Confluence whiteboards. So if you needed a tool like Miro or Mural or Draw.io, you might be able to get everything you need right out of the box with Confluence whiteboards. Um, some workflow functions like, and I'm just going to go with the easy ones. Setting a value on a post function. That's native right out of the box. These are pieces that you wouldn't have gotten in data center. And then automation adds in so much more. And then with Rovo and other pieces, you're just getting a ton more functionality where you might be able to reduce your app footprint significantly. So yes, the core tools licenses more. Start reducing apps, that licensing goes down. All things that you need to consider once you're moving over to the cloud.
I was just going to toss in here just my 2 cents is we've got we actually David and I go over it when we do our cloud migration workshop. But there's an online calculator that Atlassian provides, and I wouldn't say this is a perfect tool, but it can give you just an idea of what general costs there are, and there's some manipulation to it that you can do to account for how many admins you have, what their salaries are, what some of your other overheads are, and you can just get kind of a quick visual. What I would say as a add to or a caveat to that is we have plenty of people here at Valiantys that can help you with a more in-depth understanding of what some of those costs would be. And so, you can always reach out. I'll plug Robert. He's happy to, or get you in touch with the right person or
Yeah.
help work on that. And so that way you can help estimate what those would be. But generally speaking, I just threw a link to that calculator in chat.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, generally speaking, you will see some level of savings from going from depending on how you handle your self-hosted to then how you handle things on cloud. So if you can deprecate that stuff and you can remove the overhead that you were using for on-prem products, then it can obviously help towards the savings. And so there's timelines to that. There's a lot of different ways to slice and dice it, but
Yeah. One
feel
thing
free
I
to
would
look at the
just,
calculator.
yeah, no, thank you. David, you mentioned this being a topic you'd talk about in the workshops. I just want to let everybody know there's another workshop coming up on September 16th from 12 to 3 Central. So Mark your calendars.
Cody and I lead that. We'd love to have you there.
Mhm.
Love to see you. It's
Yeah.
it's longer, it's more in depth. We try to make it interactive. You can turn
Mhm.
your mics on and we can talk. I see these last two questions and I love them. So
Yeah, please.
I know we're running short on time, so we'll have to try to be real succinct.
Yeah. So
Ariel, which one do you want us to do?
Okay, so let's do what is the rollback plan if the cloud migration fails or corrupts data mid-process?
So I love this question because Cody knows what I'm going to say because I kind of there was a time when 3-4 years ago where rollback was a thing, and it's my thought is we really gonna need to kind of throw this whole rollback idea out the window because we don't need to roll back anymore, really. The first of all, the migration tools are not destructive in any way ever. They simply read the data. They're not gonna corrupt your source at all. Another thing that goes along with sort of the idea of a rollback is you do a migration and then you have a go, no go decision where we meet and we talk with the customer and we talk about how did it go? Are we gonna, is it a go? Or are we gonna just go ahead and approve and transition our users to the cloud? These days, in these days, it is hardly ever a no-go anymore. I mean, the only time it's a no-go is when the tooling just fails somehow and doesn't perform the way it did when we did our tests, and we hardly ever see that happen. I mean, I'm talking about like maybe 1% or less. I mean, but you don't really need to do a rollback because you don't modify your source system. I mean, the rollback is very simply, if it fails somehow, you very simply send an communique out to all your users and you say, just continue logging into data center on Monday. The migration didn't happen this weekend, and it's that simple. We don't modify your production system to do the migration. If we have to do any kind of modifications, we refresh your production system over to a secondary instance and we migrate out of your secondary instance instead. A lot of times we do that even if we don't have to do modifications, but yeah, as far as having to put your production system back into a certain state, we generally don't have to do that, and we avoid having to do that. If there's anything that might lead us down that path, we work to the point to where we don't have to do that. So it's very simply just a matter of, okay, log on to data center as usual Monday because the migration didn't work this weekend for some reason or another. And anybody else can add to that if they'd like to.
I was gonna say, I mean, you nailed it, David, and
Yep.
I agree with all of that. It's we take a lot of steps to prevent any kind of a strenuous rollback process, or that's our goal in a lot of these migrations. So, as much as we can, try to work from that secondary instance and all the other steps David mentioned, so that way the rollback, heaven forbid, if you need to do that, would be very easy. And just to add to David's comment about 1%, in my years of doing this, I still haven't seen one, knock on wood, but it's the tooling is good. It's very predictable, is what you can expect. And again, this is why we do the testing that we do, so that when we get to production migration weekend, everything can just kind of flow as smoothly as possible. I know we've got one other question in here. Happy if anybody else wants to jump in on that question, or we can move to the last one.
yeah, no,
Don't
let's
be steal
move
your
on
thunder.
because we have a couple of minutes left.
Yeah.
Okay, final one. What are your top tips to prepare for a Jira or Confluence cloud migration to make it go as smoothly as possible?
I like this question because we could do a whole webinar on this.
Yeah.
We do.
So since we don't have much time, I'll just fire some stuff off real fast. Some things that come to my mind, and Cody and the rest of you can be thinking about what you might add. First of all, migrate with as few add-ons as possible.
Yep.
It's not at all unusual for us to start a migration with a customer and they're thinking we need to take all our add-ons, and as we go through the process, they realize like, okay, we don't really need that one, we don't need that one, and they self-eliminate. They make the list smaller. Second big thing that comes to mind is don't put yourself, if you can help it, don't put yourself into an under the gun type of situation where you have to compress your migration timeline. And,
Yep.
you've got a migration that's reasonably would maybe be a 4-month process and you're trying to squeeze it into 2.5 months. That's just going to make everything harder. Might make you have to sacrifice some quality of your migration and result in more cleanup afterwards. So try not to wait till the last minute. Those are the two things that come to mind for me right away. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say cleanup. So data cleanup, user cleanup, app cleanup, like do a self-assessment on your side, understand with your stakeholders what's really important. Know the questions to ask them, because if you ask people if their work is important, they will always say yes. So we have to work around that kind of stuff and understand what can we leave behind, where can we leave this? Like, can we export? Do you have security processes you have to take, law abiding processes you have to take? You need this data. Okay, can we export this to a CSV or a Postgres database and leave it somewhere else, and then migrate only the half that's really used by your team? That kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I would also just I guess I'll make another shameless plug. We do an entire workshop around this that we'll have in September, and we start from start to finish of all the aspects to consider when you're starting to plan a migration. So that's from how do you get C-suite buy-in, or C-suite, how do you get your leadership buy-in, such as your security and all of that, and all the different steps to think about and plan for. And the biggest piece that I would say is where we run into a lot of our ire is going to be around the apps. And so the real understanding of who's using what apps, how they're being used. Do they really need those apps? Does the company want to pay for those apps anymore? Can it be replaced with native functionality? There's a lot of questions around that. And those are just great places to start. But this is an area that we specialize in, and we can help guide you through that. And that's just a great way to help alleviate any concerns you have with something that can be very important to your organization. So
Yeah, I'd say just know thyself and plan. I will say that in terms of determining how apps are being used, it's not always the easiest. There is a tool for Jira called App Usage for Jira that's always worth having a look at, but even that tool is not the easiest to work with. So if you ever need any help, please reach out. We can help you.
Mhm. Great questions today. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks so much, team.
Yeah.
All right. With that, I think we can wrap up. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Appreciate all
Thank
the
you.
questions today, everyone.